What is up, everybody, and welcome back. We are back, and we finally shipped off the stand-ins once and for all. We told them their services are no longer needed, and much like most of the alternates that are on location for the challenge, they ultimately don't end up getting used. So this is kind of what we're stuck with going forward, guys. So if you don't like it, you're going to learn to love it. So
yeah, I guess I'm all that's available, and I've filled up every slot. So here I am. I keep on talking about the show.
Well, speaking of the show, we're 13 days away from the Challenge 40 Battle of the Eras premiering, and from what I could tell, I think the show's actually getting, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've covered it longer than me, but in recent memory, I feel like the show, this season in particular, is getting, like, more coverage than I feel like the show's gotten in, like, a pretty long time. Like, I know they've had a couple billboards of All-Stars and stuff, and, like, just seasons in general, like in Times Square and stuff, but I feel like in terms of, like, mainstream coverage, like, TJ was just on CBS Mornings, I think earlier today or yesterday to promote the show. I think Bananas and somebody else are on Hot Ones, which is like, or they're going to be on Hot Ones, which is a pretty popular like YouTube channel where they try like spicy stuff. You've even had Taylor Swift's boyfriend Travis Kelce and his brother. They have a podcast that's really popular. They mentioned that the Challenge Season 40 is coming up, so they're getting some pretty mainstream coverage. From what you can remember as your time in the fandom, when can you remember like a season in which it's gotten like a lot of mainstream buzz, like prior to this one?
The only one I remember is Dirty 30. Dirty 30 got a lot of hype, and I think that they're kind of following the template for that one on this season. I remember like hearing a Dirty 30 advertisement on the radio. Wow. Which, I couldn't tell you if they're advertising season 40 on the radio because I don't listen to the radio anymore. I'm surprised I even did in 2017, but they made a big deal out of Dirty 30, probably bigger than what they're doing for Battle of the Eras. But my favorite thing, looking back at Dirty 30, is Ashley Mitchell going to all of the press tours and all of those things, knowing good and well she quit like 20 minutes into the first episode, but she just shows up, she's signing autographs, she's getting all the swag, and she quit.
Did Shane Raines? I think Shane Raines went to them too, despite obviously how he left the show.
Yeah,
I mean, people definitely played the gimmick. Good for them. I mean, they probably got paid too, so I mean that didn't hurt. But I remember seeing that. There was plenty of people actually that I knew that actually went to those things. I think it was like Times Square. It was like, was it a day or was it a week? Like they were just like promoting the show. I remember it was like a huge thing.
I don't know how long they did it for because I did not go to New York. I mean, I like the show, but I am not traveling. I mean, at the time, I would have had to travel like 5 hours to get there. Sorry, I'm not happening to go to. I don't know. Someone was having a fitness class.
Yeah,
I'm good. I'll stay here. But it went on for a while. At least the footage that they got from those events, they used and used and used.
Yeah. So, I mean, good for the show. I think a lot's been made in recent years about the direction that it's taken, good or bad, wherever you may lie in your opinions. But I think one thing can be said is that they're trying to model 40 in a vein to where it's viewed as like this, like, cornerstone season. I think as it should. I think they're in a position now where they kind of have to market that way. I view this season as sort of like a make or break within the franchise, in my personal opinion. How do you feel heading into 40, both in terms of your excitement or anticipation levels, but also where you feel like we sit currently as a franchise heading into it.
Well, one thing that I've kind of always said is you can kind of tell with the seasons which one's experimental and which one needs to be a hit. And this one needs to be a hit. Like, you could tell that they were cutting corners and the budget just was a bit lower on Battle for a New Champion. And that was the whole premise. They were like, you guys are so hungry for a victory that we're going to pay you a third of what we pay a regular champion because you'll do it. You'll settle for less. And they did. But this season, like, they have big names and it kind of has to work. So I think as a franchise, the challenge is pretty healthy. The flagship is really the best thing MTV has going for it. Maybe RuPaul's Drag Race now is a big name for MTV, but the challenge is really the biggest draw that the network has.
Well, not including Jersey Shore, obviously.
I don't know. The ratings for Jersey Shore aren't what they used to be. I don't know if that was a joke or not, but at one point Jersey Shore was the show.
Like prime Jersey Shore was like a just phenomenon, but yeah, Family Vacation these days is a bit hit or miss.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're definitely right. They're gonna probably keep pumping these out, and as long as people will watch them. But I feel like from a quality perspective, this is definitely a make or break season, and I think they're banking on the fact that it will be. And if what we know about potential looming All-Stars 5 in the horizon, they, I think, are in their thought process thinking like back-to-back, they could do like a double dip here to where both these two seasons get marketed well, and we potentially start pushing forward the franchise into its next sort of era. But yeah, 13 days away. We'll keep you guys posted on possible coverage that we might be doing on it. But here to keep you guys, with your fix here in the meantime, we're going to be talking about in preparation of season 40. We're going to be looking back at seasons, and we're going to each be giving our most underrated and overrated seasons that we feel in from our perspective. So each of us are going to get 3 for each category. So in total, there's going to be 12 seasons. We might have some that are the same, but each of us are going to list like 6 total, 3 over and 3 under. I want to preface from the beginning here that this is merely just a subjective opinion for the two of us. Some seasons that you might like or some hate, you might disagree with us. You're most likely going to disagree with us. That's just kind of how things work. But just know, at least on my end, that just if I say a season's overrated, doesn't mean that I think it's bad. I just think it gets kind of like hyped up maybe a little bit more than what I feel like it really was. But that's not a bad thing if you're excited. But it's just, I might feel like that season gets a little more, steam blown up its ass than some other seasons that I feel like aren't maybe talked about as much as I feel like they should. So, with that in mind, heading into this particular topic, where's your head at?
Well, I always look at the seasons from 2 angles. Mm-hmm. I try to remember because the bulk of the seasons I watched live. I watched like either on MTV the night of, or if it's a streaming season, I watched it sequentially as it streamed week by week. So I tried to like return to that mindset of being excited for the episodes, or if it was just kind of like drying out. And then I also kind of look at it from the angle of rewatching it, because let's be honest, there are some seasons I've probably seen like 10 times. Mm-hmm. Because, I've been watching the show for 2 decades now, and what else am I going to do with my time but rewatch it? But I do agree with you. Some of the seasons I have as underrated are definitely not my favorite seasons. It's just people really hate them or ignore them, and I think that they're like a B grade season. Not the top of the top, but definitely worth your attention.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. That's kind of where my head space was at when looking at underrated seasons. Um, so with that in mind, I think we could kick this off. Keep the anticipation no longer. Give the people what they want. Do you want to start, or you want me to start? How do you want to go about doing this? Do we want to bounce back and forth? Like you list off an underrated. Well, actually, yeah. I think overrated's probably a lot more like stingier, so that'll probably be more anticipated. We'll save that for the end. I think we'll go. You could start with an underrated. I'll go underrated, bounce back to you, and then so on and so forth. So yeah, you can go ahead and list me your first underrated season.
Sure. So one season, I think that I enjoy especially rewatching it. And I know that we've recast this season, but I still like it as it stands. And that is Rivals 3. What I will say about that season is if you're like an old school fan, like if you watched the Carnival game seasons, like the Inferno 1 or the Gauntlet, or even like the Gauntlet 2, this is almost like a return to the not quite as physically competitive format that we used to see. Like a lot of the challenges this season were like the Up All Night one. I know a lot of people like that. And they have like the one where you had to
the laundry one, remember? When they the one that Ashley did really well in, where they were like almost like there it was like what was it? The lube?
Yeah. The soap.
Yeah, soap, yes.
Yeah.
That one. Like that's like an old school type of challenge that you would see back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. And like the one where they had to choose this or that, and they had to either eat a birthday cake or run in their birthday suit. Like they don't really do challenges like that anymore. And the 10 seasons preceding Rivals 3, they don't do challenges like that. So it was just kind of a fun season filled with like super unserious drama. And I can, when I'm in the right mood, I can go back to that season.
I just rewatched it a month ago, specifically because you called it under. I remember in passing, I had a feeling you were going to say Rivals 3, because the whole reason why I went back and rewatched it is because I think you had mentioned, I don't know if it was during the one where we were recasting, or I think you just mentioned in passing about Rivals 3 not being as bad as people make it out to be. I went and rewatched the thing about a month ago, and I actually really enjoyed it. So everything you said about the daily challenges, I thought they were all campy and fun. Definitely felt very like old school, and like not for nothing too. I mean, like, there wasn't like, we knew like what the end game kind of was. I think everybody kind of knew Bananas and Sarah were going to win, but sometimes it's not about the destination. It's about the journey and how we get there. And like we had a lot of just like funny random moments, like Tony shitting his pants, and it's like going back and forth from scene to scene of Jessica crying on the phone with her boyfriend and then Tony laughing in another room talking about how he shit himself. Like, oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some funny moments on that season, and to give production credit, I think they knew that we all knew who was going to win that season. So the splitting of the money twist did keep the final actually kind of interesting, or an outcome that we thought we could predict.
Yeah, that Rivals 3 was one of my honorable mentions, so it's a good shout by you. I got to make mention, Simone also had the hots for Wes for a short minute there on, which is like, gets lost in the lore of challenge history.
Yeah, and another thing that they brought up on All-Stars 3 was how Wes and Kellyanne used to date, and they
didn't bring it up at all on Rivals 3.
But they did. There was one point where, like, everyone was trying to go against Bananas, and Wes and Kellyanne are, like, sitting there and working together.
Yeah.
I don't think they quite as overtly state that they're, like, exes working together, but they were exes working together. And if you watch the Ruins and Fresh Meat 2, you see that moment, and for what it's worth, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, Easter egg, one might say. It's a shame we didn't get them on like an exes season ever.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? But yeah, highly recommend, guys. Go and rewatch that whenever you get the time. You're gonna be, if you go in with an open mind, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. With that being said, for my first, I'm going in chronological from like when the season took place first. So I'm just to make it easier. So I tried to space things out so like a lot of these seasons weren't like so close together in terms of like the year they took place and like how far apart. But I just kept coming back to sort of like some of these seasons. For my first underrated season, this might come as a surprise to some people. And I don't know if maybe I'm just living under a rock, but me personally, I feel like this season, most people think it's good, but I feel like it doesn't get the true shine that it really deserves, in my opinion. And I feel like people kind of like gloss over it more than they should. I think Fresh Meat 2 is underrated. The reason why I think it's underrated is because when people hear Fresh Meat, they immediately think of like the first Fresh Meat. Like a lot of people reference that one as like a, trailblazing season, which it was, and like talk about like the things that happened on that season. And that gets most of like the accolades, I feel, when we look back at like Fresh Meat itself. So right then and there, Fresh Meat 2, in my opinion, has always kind of been viewed as like the little brother to the original Fresh Meat. But also, too, I don't know if it's because, like, not too long after that, we were introduced to, like, the whole rivals and exes themes, and, like, Fresh Meat kind of gets, like, washed away, in a sense, and, like, it came right after the Ruins, which was very, as we know, like, the season itself, in-your-face type of season, and then the stuff that came out after the fact in real life, like, kind of clouded over, I feel like, Fresh Meat 2 in a little ways, and like it probably didn't help that we got, like, I guess maybe in some people's eyes, a non-exciting winner, like our outcome, you know what I mean? Like we got like a pretty like impressive victory, but we got what a lot of people would probably view as like maybe like the less exciting or less entertaining outcome with Landon and Carly winning. So maybe that has a lot to do with things. That's my personal headspace on it. Do you feel like Fresh Meat 2 is underrated?
No.
You don't? Okay.
I think it's one of the most polarizing seasons. I think some people love it and some people dislike it. I like all the seasons to some degree. This is one that I like less. I think the casting is a bit weird, especially compared to the first Fresh Meat. And I will say this, looking back at it, like we didn't quite realize how stacked the cast really was during the original during the original airing, because we have like Kenny and Wes and Evelyn and Landon, Darrell, and then we have Cara Maria who emerges, and Laurel who emerges as big personalities, and Danny Jameson's on the cast.
You know who else was on the cast too? And, when you think of, like, underrated, like, this, I mean, hence we didn't even mention him yet. That's how underrated he is. Jeff Barr.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who finished second in the pull-ups in the combine for the Fresh Meat 2 men. So,
wow, if that was an Olympic sport, he would have silver.
Yeah.
Really impressive. But I do feel like with that season, it kind of, the main storyline almost goes nowhere. It's Wes versus Kenny, and then Wes just like really loses in a funky, unsatisfying way. He just kind of like stops, and Mandy wants to continue the exile, and Wes is like, nah. And then Kenny loses to Landon in the end. So I just feel like the storyline doesn't really add up in the end, but
well, I'll tell you where the season went wrong. want to know where it really went wrong, in my opinion, and it doesn't get talked about nearly as much as I feel. And, like, this is actually a serious point, like, all jokes aside. Like, the guy involved might seem like it's going to be a joke, but, like, legitimately speaking here. I think the season lost its potential reinvigoration of a story when Danny went home. And, like, you know, some people that all first hearing that are going to be like, well, I mean, sure, it's Danny, though. Like, of course he went home. Like, what are you talking about? My counterpoint, if you go and watch that Exile, your partner was supposed to carry a weighted bag the entire time. You're not allowed to carry your partner's bag. And Danny and Sandy were winning for majority of that Exile. And on the last leg, you see Pete take Jill's bag off of her because she was struggling, and he carries both, which means that Jill gets to run without any weight. And they pass Danny and Sandy at the last second. So I'm going to sit here and say that I think that was kind of bogus, and I feel like they should have gotten DQ'd for that.
I mean, I definitely see potential if Danny stuck around, because whether or not you think
he would have had to pick a side between Kenny and Wes. Exactly. You know what I mean? And that's what I think would have actually given us more juice. You know, like, could you imagine if Danny comes back into the house and he has like this internal struggle of like, will he or won't he, like, who he's going to side with? And either way, it makes fantastic TV. Because if he sides with Kenny and like betrays, well, I mean, Wes would have, I guess, in some people's eyes, betrayed him already, but like, siding with like his sworn enemy, that would have made fantastic TV.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people, if you're newer to the franchise, realize how much gas Danny had behind him. Like, people on production loved Danny. And this is from the real world Austin. I think the episode where his mom passes away is like the highest rated episode of all time, which is really sad because it's like, you know, he's losing his mom, but people watched it, and people fell in love with him and Melinda. And during that time, there was just so much, you know, they were just really enthusiastic, which is probably why he was cast on Fresh Meat 2, which is such a small veteran pool of people to pull from.
Yeah, I mean, you won't hear a complaint out of me about him being on our screens, and I hope. I mean, I wouldn't get my hopes up about it, but I think, you know, whether it be Homecoming, which even less likely, but I would have accepted a Homecoming return, and I would definitely accept the All Stars return from Danny Jameson in the future if it ever happens. But I'll allow you to reveal to me your second underrated season.
So my second underrated season, and I don't know if I've mentioned this one to you, but I went back and watched it not that long ago, and I was like, this is actually really good, is Champs vs. Stars 2. Nothing about it makes sense.
The last one.
Yes.
The one with Casper.
And Casper, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Nothing about this format makes sense. I mean, I think like 3 of the people on the Champs team had actually won. There was CT, Ashley, and definitely not Anissa. I don't know. Wes, yeah, had won. And then like some of the stars, I didn't even know who they were. There was Jose, who was eliminated. He was like the runner-up, like 18th place on Big Brother. But he was a star. Go figure.
Drake was there.
Yeah. I mean, but somehow this band of like misfit stars actually were a pretty formidable team, and they worked together even when there was division between, or when they blended the red team and the blue team with Champs and Stars. So it's actually interesting to see how people navigate this game. And there were people who were cast as stars that were playing a very savvy social and political game. Mostly Louise, but like even like when push came to shove, like Drake Bell is like making decisions that screw up the champs. And Lil Mama's like forcing ties for no reason whatsoever. Like it's kind of funny.
That was a really good season, honestly. Like, I think they just were starting to find their footing with that show, and then they nixed it right as they found their footing with it. Like, they hit gold on that season.
Yeah.
And they could have been, like, like the same way, like, the cast members we're used to seeing are recurring. They bring them back, and they, like, go on seasons multiple times. They could have did that again with Casper and Luis, who I feel like, honestly, I don't know, like, obviously they're, like, stars for a reason. They've got their own, like, careers, I'm sure, and, like, livelihoods that they, maybe prevent them from leaving for that long to go and film. But those are two cast members who I think would be welcomed additions to the flagship show.
Yeah, and from what I hear from some of those people, it's not for lack of trying, but they have actual lives outside of the show. Okay. I would have loved if they did another installment of that franchise where one team was all challenge champions, then the other team was all champions from other reality TV shows. So, like, I don't know, people who won Survivor or The Amazing Race or whatever show you want it to be. You could have gotten Hoops from I Love Money and Flavor of Love for all I care. But, those are people that are good at reality TV that could have spiced up the competition a bit. But, hey, I don't work in casting.
Well, what team would Dunbar be on then? Because he obviously won, the challenge, but then he won that other reality show with those three other people.
I think he can, like, swing between the two teams. We'll call him a swinger.
Kind of like Infiltrator, War of the Worlds 2 type of thing.
He can penetrate either side.
Right. He's, pretty good at that. I'll give my underrated season now, my second one. And speaking of second ones, this was the second one of this installment. However, they didn't acknowledge it as such. I think it's underrated, and I will die on this hill. And that's Battle of the Seasons 2012. I think that we had some all-timer fights and just dramatic moments on this. Like, you probably have at least 2 or 3. Like, if you're just going to, like, show somebody, like, the history of this show and, like, they ask about, like, drama and fights, you've got, like, probably 2 or 3 banner moments of just, like, you could just hang them up, hang your hat on that, being, like, Exhibit A, and then it's just, like, the Dustin and Frank fight, Marie and Derek with the plant, like, just so much, like, quality entertainment. And a lot of people thought that was, like, maybe even a turnoff, or why. Maybe a lot of people thought this season was a little too, like, on the nastier, toxic side. I think it's funny and really entertaining. Obviously, like, from a competitive perspective, this isn't the best cast, but I think the way this show started, you never really, like, looked at it from the perspective of so and so is, like, this type of competitor, blah, blah, blah. Like, people were more in tune with the personalities. So that's why I enjoy it from that perspective. But not only that, you've got some really good, like, challenges, I feel like, on this. Both daily challenges and, I mean, look no further than the eliminations. You get introduced to 2 of the most, like, hallmark eliminations in the show's franchise on this season with Hall Brawl and Not So Fast. Mm-hmm. Like, for that alone, I think this season's got to be underrated. So yeah, I think it's underrated. I'll die on that hill.
Yeah, I think you picked another one that I think is really polarizing, but this time I lean towards liking it. I think that this is definitely peak Heights Over Wire. This is like one of the seasons where, like, every challenge is Heights Over Wire for a while, and I think that was a bit off-putting for some people.
Right.
But I think one really underrated thing about this season is they could have formed, like, a really good Exes season with some of the people who were cast, and they went with a different direction, like Danny and Melinda, Knight and Jenny, Rob and Marie,
Trey and Laura.
Trey and Laura. There's probably a couple other people that are exes on this cast as well. And I mean, if Sydney,
Zach and Ashley,
yeah. If Sydney made it, Kellyanne and Dunbar,
and John A, kind of.
I mean, by MTV standards,
yeah.
So I think that this was, they definitely made a choice. But the cast was really like interconnected, and I think that they did a good job of like rehashing drama from the original seasons that the cast came from, while also like giving us some really toxic people that gave us more drama.
Yeah, I mean, this from a drama standpoint, this was like a hot mess, but it's like really funny, honestly, if you just like suspend your disbelief. It's like, you know what it is? It's like similar, in my opinion, to Final Reckoning in that vein. You know what I mean? Like, where like there's seemingly like drama carries the show first, whereas competition's second. But I'll allow you now to give me your final underrated season.
So remember how we said like some of the seasons we're going to call them underrated because they're like B grade seasons or C grade seasons, but everyone treats them like they're F grade seasons.
Yeah.
My final pick, and this might be a little bit of a surprise, is Spies, Lies, and Allies. A lot of people don't like it, and the first time I watched it, I wasn't that much of a fan of it, but I did a rewatch of like every season, and it took a long time because these seasons are long when you get to the later half. And Spies, Lies, and Allies kind of stuck out as like in the late 30s, the one season that captured my attention. And I think it's because the first time, and I can't dismiss the fact that when it was originally airing, people were really disappointed by the cast. We just had double agents with all these rookies. And then basically all of the veterans, other than Amanda, just did double agents. But it has a similar aspect to it that War of the Worlds had, where there's so many veterans that have just worked with each other that it almost eliminates the status. And like people like Tori that notoriously skate to the end, she actually had to work. Amanda put her on the Ruby cell, and her position in the game was not secured. We also got the 3-team format later in the season, which was a format that people had been asking for a long time. And it was kind of interesting. I think a lot of people were upset with, was it the Sapphire Cell that all like the Big Brother, like Nani, Casey, Josh were on? A lot of people were not really fans of them winning, which I understand, but they were also, they were doing well. So if you're going to watch the seasons in the late 30s again, this is one that I would like actually give a chance to.
Wow, I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
Do you like it better than Ride or Die and 39?
Definitely. I think that 39 tried to like play on a lot of the drama that stemmed from this season, but Spies, Lies, and Allies actually did it better. Like a lot of the rookie drama is actually interesting to watch. Like Michaela like blowing up her game episode 1 and making it more difficult for Michelle. Like Tasha just calling out Tori for no reason. I mean, I guess there was a reason, but and then like, this is going to sound wild, but I actually agreed with Josh when he was defending Amber. Josh was completely like, he needed to go in with level 3 intensity, and he gave us level 10. But if I had to pick sides, it would be his. So it's kind of rewatching it refreshing to be able to see it for what it is.
I might have to give it a shot then. I'll trust your word for it.
Yeah, just make sure to like clear out an entire weekend and maybe the rest of the week too. It's long.
And the week after that, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you. I was gonna actually make a tweet about this week, and I just never really got around to it. I want to know your thoughts before we get into my final underrated season. Do you think that they went with this type of format with bringing in a lot of their newer people that they brought into the franchise throughout the War of the Worlds era got like basically removed from the franchise? Do you feel like that's why they brought in all these people?
For Spies, Lies, and Allies?
Yeah.
No, I think that they wanted to branch out and air the show on more international networks, like more like MTV Germany and Sweden, or
Yeah.
Just kind of like reuse it in those capacities. And I think that's why they dug a little bit deeper with the international casting.
Well, before we actually no, this is when we started to go international, I should say. This is my final underrated season. I got Vendettas. I know the format's kind of weird and doesn't make sense really, but honestly, I think the drama is fantastic. I think I like, for the most part, the dailies on this, and I think that honestly, the strategic gameplay that happens on this season is just really good stuff. Like, we have big moments here, like, at the time, me watching this through the lens of early 2018, glued to my television screen with Devin and Bananas' rivalry. At that time. That episode where Devin eliminated Bananas and subsequently earlier was the whole Kaylee and Nelson fallout, and then the girls throwing the luggage. That's one of my favorite challenge episodes of all time. Like, in a singular episode. I watched that live. And keep in mind, like, I literally didn't know about spoilers at the time. So imagine, like, going into that blind. Like, well, I might have knew about spoilers, but I wasn't, like, I didn't know what happened yet. So, like, imagine going into that blind. Like, that, kind of stayed with me forever. Like, that is one of my favorite episodes I've ever watched of the show. So you had that, Tony making that move to throw Johnny in with, like, his delivery was amazing. Brad on this season. I think Brad on Vendettas might be my favorite singular male cast member season of all time, in every facet of the show. So, yeah, I actually enjoyed Zach on this season. They had some really good rookie casting, too. I will say that. This is probably one of their better rookie casting jobs they've done in show history, in my opinion. If you think about it, they had Melissa, Kaylee, Joss, Rogan. Obviously, Rogan didn't stay long, but he would go on to show on the next two appearances he made what he has to offer, and from both a performance and a drama standpoint. Kyle went on to do a bunch of seasons, obviously, and he proved his worth. And then Kaylee and Melissa gave us a lot of drama, and Melissa's a solid competitor. We had Natalie, who was a big focal point of this season and would prove to be one on Final Reckoning as well, regardless of your opinion of her. And people don't realize this, and it doesn't get talked about a lot, but we were, like, really close to getting Paulie debuting on this season, too. Like, Victor took his place at the 11th hour because Paulie, like, dropped something on his foot, like, a week before they were supposed to go and film, and he broke it. Otherwise, Paulie would have been a rookie on this show, which I don't really know how that plays out, honestly. I don't anticipate him making it super far under these circumstances where he's a rookie and, like, it's individual. Like, I don't know if he how well he does, but we would have at least gotten better content out of it than we did with Victor. So could you imagine a world where Paulie was also debuting on this season? We're talking about, like, just one of the greatest rookie casts ever. I still think it is, but Yeah, that's where my stance is at. I love this season. I think the reason why it's underrated is because it's sandwiched in between Final Reckoning and Dirty 30.
Yeah, I will say that I like this season a lot. Nothing about it should work. Like, absolutely nothing makes sense. There is no logic. There is no strategy involved. People just get what they get, and they have to deal with it. But I love this season. I couldn't tell you what most of the challenges are. I couldn't tell you what most of the eliminations are. Like, I forget about them. Like, literally, one of the eliminations, if I recall correctly, was to, like, Brad had to take a bath and splash water out of the side, and they called it an elimination.
That was him against Victor.
Yeah. And I don't think people... did you ever watch Big Brother?
No.
Victor was a big grab from Big Brother. Like, he had a lot of gusto behind him after Big Brother 18, I think he was on. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he won, like, the fan favorite America's Player award that season.
Yeah.
So, you know, he was a pretty good grab for the first ever Big Brother group to be on the challenge. He just didn't seem to give a shit about it. Whereas Natalie definitely rose to the occasion.
Victor didn't even, like, promote his time on the show not once. I don't even think he's even acknowledged it.
Yeah, I don't know why. Like, he didn't get, like, an exceptionally bad edit. Like, nothing happened. I mean, I guess he got into, like, a small argument with Shane, but...
Do you think they tried at all for him and Shane on Final Reckoning? Like, even, like, a gander?
I absolutely think that they wanted that pairing. If I was in production at the time, that's what I would have wanted, because Big Brother, or Victor, was the biggest name from Big Brother. I mean, we got Davon, and I would definitely argue that Davon was a bigger name to migrate from Big Brother to the challenge on Final Reckoning. But, you know, at the time, Vendetta's era, Victor was a pretty big name.
Man, I mean, what a shame. Yeah, no, I definitely feel like the fact that it's sandwiched in between Dirty 30 and Final Reckoning is probably why it might get a little more overlooked, just because those are kind of like two, like, they bookend the trilogy, so to speak.
Yeah, I will say this was the first season I ever watched, thanks to the powers of the internet, where I was able to, I guess the internet was broken, we'll go with that, and I was able to watch it on the MTV Germany website, and I got to, like, listen to the uncensored version. And, I mean, it was just nice that we introduced the UK kids, and they all had their UK swears that they were able to yell out at everyone. But I will say the rookie class has aged way better than I ever expected.
Yeah, you know, like, in the UK, when they, like, put this on streaming a couple years ago, it's like Joss and Kyle's obvious, because they're from the UK, whatever, like, on the loading screen, and it's Brittany. Like, yeah, just that's it. It's just them three. So, good little nuggets there.
Better than what the US did.
I got to tell Brittany that, like, when I interviewed her, like, 3 years ago, and she's like, "Oh, no way!" Really? Yeah. So, you know, we can talk about our overrated seasons now. Yeah, I mean, if you want to start this off, feel free to take the floor.
Sure. I think you know the first one I'm going to say.
I think I know what it is. Is it Rivals 2?
It's Rivals 2.
Okay.
This season was such a weird overcorrection because they didn't have the veterans that people expected on Battle of the Seasons. And the pairs just don't make sense for the most part. For some reason, like, there is a weird filter over it that just makes everything look grainy, and as time progressed and TVs got better, the filter looked worse. And the challenges are not very interesting to me. People made a huge deal out of it because it was CT's first. He won, and, like, I can't take that away from him. He did what he had to do, but Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like that exciting about it, especially with the seasons that follow.
Yeah, I see your argument. I mean, for me, it's like a comfort watch for me, only because I'm satisfied with the outcome, and also like I love the. So, at large, I love the cast, but I think the pairings aren't like strong enough. I feel in terms of like what they mean with like the premise of the season. Like it's supposed to be a rival season, and I don't feel like we have like the same intensity that we had from Rivals One. Whereas like the teams, I mean, maybe like Dunbar and Tyree, but that's about it. I mean, no, actually, they had. So like there was like obviously coming out of it they didn't have a good relationship, but like heading into it there was nothing to go off of. So like you had pairings like that that were just weak on paper in terms of like what their rivalries were. So that I feel docks it a little bit. I still like generally enjoy it. Like there's like some things on it that. Listen, I'll take a season like this over like a Double Agents any day of the week. So, you know, it's a comfort watch for me. But I understand your, valid points there.
Yeah.
Well, this season, what I'm about to say is going to be the first of a few that I think is going to really rock the boat here. Oof, God. I've got X as one as my first overrated one. And this is like definitely falls under the tier of not because I think it's a bad season. I don't. In fact, I was just watching it recently. I do like it. But I feel like X's 2 is like much better than X's 1. So that's kind of like my thought process and thinking here, because I feel like when a lot of people think back to the X's theme, they often like tend to refer back to like the first one with like DM and CT. Obviously that takes precedent because it was probably the strongest X's pairing that we've ever had in the sense of like the backstory. But if you just look at like the rest of the content, I think X's 2 just like clears X's 1 in most areas, and I think the unsatisfying outcome of X's definitely taints it a little bit too, for me. So yeah, I just think it's, again, not a bad season. I just think that it's a little overrated.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a forgettable season to me. Like, if I told people that Heather, or how many people do you think, if you asked them what season did Dustin Zito debut on, do you think people would?
They'll think Battle of the Seasons.
Yeah, it feels kind of forgotten in many aspects. Although I was just kind of like I was going through Pluto TV recently, and X's was on, and it was the episode where Leroy gets eliminated, and he's like, I don't even feel bad that we lost right now because Naomi gave it her all, and this is one of the hardest challenges in my life. And Naomi, who's clearly standing on a box, mind you, like pipes over at Leroy and he's like, "You've only done 2 challenges." Like, we had some like good personalities on this season that were just kind of like swept under the rug.
Yeah, like Vinny Fodi.
Oh yeah,
good personalities.
Yeah.
But you could go ahead and give your second overrated now.
So, another one that I think, not a bad season, but like a lot of people have this as their favorite season ever, and I just don't get it. And that is Free Agents.
Honestly, if I could have an honorable mention, that would probably be in it.
And I think it's a good season. It's fairly competitive, although like I still don't quite understand why it's called Free Agents, because it's not like everyone competes solo.
Yeah.
They change it up. They change up the format every episode. So it's not like you're fighting for a spot on a team either. So I don't really get the name. But that aside, I do feel like this season is more of a sequel to the Duel than the Duel 2 is. Because the Duel 1, like, they had individual challenges and then partners and then big teams, and it just kind of like there was no real rhyme or rhythm to it. Whereas the Duel 2, like, everything was like you and your partner. But beyond that, like, there's not a lot of drama. It's fairly predictable. Like, everyone knew Laurel was going to win. And then, I mean, the draw was cool. That's the one thing it has going. I think at the time, especially, the draw was cool.
Yeah. Do you think the draw was executed better on free agents than the what was it? The double cross? Yeah, the double cross on Dirty 30.
You know, I don't know if I think one was executed better than the other. I view Dirty 30 as like the spiritual successor to free agents.
Yeah.
So the draw was supposed to happen the first way, the free agents way, on season 25, and then they up the ante and make it where drawing the kill card or the double cross gives you the power the second time around. That's kind of how I did that.
Yeah, I like that twist, obviously. And again, I think it's a good season, generally. But I do feel like I kind of agree with you in, like, people have it, like, super high on their, like, list of seasons. And, like, obviously it's subjective. Like, that's their opinion. But I don't know. It's never, again, this is another season that's, like, kind of never really hit the same way for me as, like, X's 2 did the season right after.
I think the one thing that really makes this season feel different than the Duel 1, the Duel 2, and even Dirty 30 is that the underdogs who make it to the end really didn't earn it that much. They got there because they were lucky. Like Johnny Riley never pulls the kill card. Nani, Devin never pull the kill card. And that's how they make it to the end. Whereas, like, you could argue that Svetlana or Brittany or even Tori on Dirty 30, you know, Brittany, I'm referring to Duel 2, they had to fight, and that's how they got to the end. I will say, though, Bananas did have to fight a lot this season, and it's the one season where I'm like, you're almost an underdog here, and I am rooting for you.
I'm forever going to be upset that we were, like, decently close to getting a Car Maria, Teresa, and Laurel final, and we didn't get it. Oh, my God. That would have fed families. Like, oh. Or at least would have fed mine. But for my second underrated, this is a season that I always see kind of thrown around as, like, a pivotal season in a lot of people's minds, and to an extent it is. But quality-wise and format-wise, I feel like it's a tad bit flawed, and that's why I think it's overrated. I think Invasion of the Champions is a little bit overrated. First off, I don't really like the format of champs really having to go against each other, because the whole thing is like, oh, to be a champ, you got to beat the champs, but then it's like, well, why are champs taking each other out? You know what I mean? I think it would have been a lot more compelling if challengers had to vote in a challenger from their team, and then the champs had to, well, I mean, the champs did vote in anyway, but, like, to face a challenger, not to go against each other. I just feel like that kind of defeated the premise. That, and I feel like, you know, we had some people kind of like Corey who, like, I didn't really feel like that had that great of a season, make the final, and then, like, you know, shit the bed in the final. I feel like people talk about this as, like, such a big season, and I guess it was, like, the debut or, like, kind of like the coming up of a lot of, like, pivotal pieces. So, like, it's an important season for sure in some sense, but I feel like quality-wise it's a bit overrated personally. Like, it's not a season I go back to rewatch, like, all the time.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you ask, because if you're a fan of the Lavender Ladies, this is like your jam. This is the season that you want to watch, because they form here. I will say, I remember watching this season in 2017, and watching Shane come back after 12 years away was like a huge shock. because he really wasn't like the biggest personality his first time around. So I really did like that they dug deep for one person. That would have benefited Battle for a New Champion a lot if they had like one just like complete gag from out of nowhere.
That would have been like a spiritual successor to Shane's return on Invasion.
Yeah,
that's got me really like intrigued now that you bring that up. Like of who they could have really reached into the bag, a non-champion, and just like brought them. Like they just because I mean, for all intents and purposes, Shane was like the elephant in the room on Invasion. Like he was stood out so much. Like you had a bunch of like young kids that are probably like trying to like be Instagram influencers and stuff, and then you just have like Shane from like the late 90s, early 2000s just like pop up like out of nowhere. Like
yeah, I mean, I don't know who could have done it on Invasion, on Battle for New Champion, but I mean, it was cool that they, I don't know if this was intentional or not, kind of have like this little bridge between the old school champions and the new school underdogs.
Yeah,
and that was Shane. But watching it in 2017. Fans will never know pain, like waiting for 5 years for Marie to come back, and then watching her leave episode 1 to freaking Kayla. Like, people have been begging for her return. Kind of like if Frank comes back and leaves on episode 1, like, people are going to be like, what the fuck? Like, people wanted Marie to come back, and then she just kind of shit the bed. But, I mean, I definitely feel like this season has moments. I see your perspective, but I like Invasion.
No, I don't dislike it. I just think it's a tad bit in the overrated column, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think Dustin, if he would have showed up on Battle for a New Champion, would have been, like, fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing here? Like, don't you have, like, kids or a family to go home to? And he's like, no.
Nobody knows who he is.
Yeah. Yeah, just, Huey's seen a couple videos that he's done.
Yeah. I mean, Huey's up to some of the similar things these days, so,
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, you could give your last overrated season.
So, this season is another one that I like, but it's not, like, top tier to me, and a lot of people treat it like it's top tier. And it is War of the Worlds 1. Now, there are a lot of good things that happen through this season, and I will say, I think this season is better than Spies, Lies, and Allies. I just think that Spies, Lies, and Allies is very poorly rated, whereas this one is, like, exceptionally high rated. And looking back at this season, the first time I watched it, it was kind of exciting. Especially because, like, it starts off with, like, this milestone moment of having Ashley versus Hunter. And then, like, after episode 6, all the veterans are gone, and you're like, what are we left with? Like, Ninja is turning into Hulkisha, and, like, now partners are splitting up. Like, I didn't really get it after a certain point. And then it also has what I really dislike when they have one female and only one winner overall.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes it a little less satisfying. A lot of people will point to the final as being like the most brutal final ever. And it probably is.
But it was boring to watch.
Yeah, did it have to be? Like, was anyone asking for that? I don't think so.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I don't know. I think it's just because, like, when I watched it live at the time, I think, like, it was really, like, it was a change of pace from the season before with Final Reckoning, where it kind of felt like cliffhanger after cliffhanger. I felt like we were, like, proportion-wise getting, like, the most, like, bang for our buck, so to speak, with, like, drama to competition and, like, advancement of the game ratio. It just kind of felt like more digestible each week. Like, I feel like we were getting like a proper serving size. So that's,
Yeah.
I guess, why I gravitated towards it.
I totally understand and like see that because I remember that. I remember Final Reckoning, so many cliffhangers, and this one, like, we actually like had people eliminated each week, and you know, if you sat down and watched the 1 hour at the time 1 hour episode, like, it was a good watch, and I'm not taking away from that, but I think that there's a good amount that's kind of left to be desired with this season. And then another thing that always just kind of was like, what is this format? Whereas the War of the Worlds, like, a good number of the rookies are from the U.S. Like, what is this format if the War of the Worlds has U.S. versus U.S.?
Yeah, Gus and Chase were literally from like America.
And the Nolan twins,
Maddie. Yeah. Well, since I just mentioned it, this is probably going to rock the boat as well. My last overrated season is Final Reckoning. Again, I'll be honest, when I first watched this, I like hated the season. Like, I think in real time, not hated, but like I was on the fence, or I wasn't feeling it in real time, only because of like I hated the pacing of it and like the portions that we were getting each week. Like, it was just kind of like very like, you know, pendulum swing. Like, it was hard to follow, kind of. So I didn't like how all over the place it was, and I feel like the gameplay and the game setup itself is like very flawed with like the Redemption House, and like it was just kind of like a little like, when are we going to get the ball rolling type of thing, like, each week. But with that being said, on a binge, I think it's great. I think it's very, you know, if you're into like the social aspect and the storylines, it's a really entertaining season to watch on a binge. I just wouldn't watch it again, like, or I would have apprehension to watch it again live. So it's really a catch-22 situation, but I've always kind of like viewed it as a little overrated, just because like I've seen people be like, this is my favorite season of all time.
Yeah, that is definitely a season that I like a lot, but
yeah,
you're absolutely right in the fact that they ruined the season with the way that they aired it, with so many cliffhangers. Like, you couldn't get an elimination and a challenge in one episode, and if you did, well, it didn't really matter because people were just going to go to the Redemption House and come right back in. And this season definitely has its flaws. But after Vendettas, my expectations of formatting were just like bottom of the barrel low, and I was just okay with that.
Yeah.
At that point, I was okay with it.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it on a binge. It's fun to watch on a binge. It's just, but that's, you know, when you're watching live each week, it takes a toll when you're like looking for some, like, you know, advancement in certain aspects, and it kind of just feels like we're all over the place. So, but no, I mean, I would definitely recommend it to somebody to watch on a binge. It's very entertaining, I'll say that.
Yeah. If you watch it on a binge and you're like comfortable or just ending like in the middle of an episode, because like you have to do that if you want to watch challenge elimination, it's fun to watch. Especially with streaming, you can do that, and it changed my whole perspective the second time around.
Yeah, it's just a shame they removed both War of the Worlds and Total Madness.
Yeah.
Plus, because that's a real bummer. I actually have a theory as to why they have, and it's not what people think. I think a lot of people think that the reason why is because of D. I actually don't think it's entirely. I mean, it partially could be, but I think actually it has more to do with Bear than it does D, in my opinion.
Yeah, that I think it's more likely to be Bear than D, because I mean, D without going too much into it, she didn't do anything illegal or punishable by law.
Bear's literally behind the prison bar right now.
I don't think he's anymore. I think he escaped. Yeah, but I'm like not even gonna joke about it. Like, not cool. I understand why. We shouldn't be celebrating him as a person, but also like, I don't think it. I don't know. I don't want to say anything too insensitive around this topic because it is a very serious matter. But I think that he is not someone that we should be putting on a pedestal, and some of these seasons really turned him into like the main character.
You could argue he was, for all his, things that he's done in his outside life, you could make the objective argument that throughout those seasons he kind of was one of the main characters. And he kind of, storyline-wise, was one of the people that like made up those seasons, those 3 seasons of, the War of the Worlds seasons and Total Madness. So,
yeah, I mean, War of the Worlds, he was a huge personality, but like he was doing like really dumb, silly things, like when he jumped on the poker table for no reason, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I wish I could get my hands on those seasons, specifically Total Madness, because that was the one I wanted to rewatch like recently, and I, didn't get the chance to, obviously. But that's for another day, I suppose. But yeah, guys, this was another great episode that we had, and I think this was probably our last non-challenge 40 thing that we're probably going to do temporarily until we kind of figure out like a plan and a schedule as to like once the season begins how we're going to decide that. So him and I will discuss amongst ourselves what the plan will be moving forward with like possible season 40 coverage. But if you guys are interested in seeing anything in particular discussed by us, such as like a preview in regards to season 40 of specifics you might want to see, please let either of us know on Twitter or in the comment section. That would probably help us out when we figure out how exactly we're going to do this. But yeah, in 13 nights from now, at like this exact time, we're going to be having Challenge 40 premiering. So exciting times coming up for the fandom. So we'll have no shortage of things to talk about for, I'm assuming, the next probably like 3 to 4 months, because I would anticipate this show running for at least probably the rest of this year into early next year, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're probably gonna follow a similar timeline to like my favorite season, Spies, Lies, and Allies, which started in August and ended around December. I'm guessing they're going to kind of cut it off right before the holidays, but your guess is as good as mine. I mean, they need to make money somehow, and advertisements help.
Yeah. Well, guys, all right, thank you for tuning in again, and we'll be back shortly with, I'm sure, some Challenge 40 breakdown previews. So, until next time.
Thanks for watching.